Hey guys, sorry I'm out again today. Still feeling a little under the weather, but hopefully I'll be back soon. I just want to give you these notes so you'll have some knowledge base on what to do. So let's go ahead and just get right into it. So today we're going to be talking about multiplying integers. So this intro problem talks about once a parachute is deployed, the skydiver descends at a rate of 5 meters per second. Where will the skydiver be in relation to the parachute deployed after 4 seconds? Well, when we're falling, we're definitely going down, which is normally expressed as a negative, right? Well, he's going down 5 meters a second, so he's going down -5. And then he's going down -5 for 2 seconds, -5 for 3, -5 for 4, so for 4 seconds it asks for us. So how could I write a multiplication sentence to write the skydiver's position after 5 seconds? Well, if I'm adding -5 4 times, I could just do 4 times the -5, right? So then suppose I asked you how much was the total distance he fell. You'd say -20 feet because he fell 20 feet. That negative represents that 20. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Multiplying negative numbers, positive numbers, multiplying a negative times a negative, a positive times a positive, all that good stuff. And we'll learn all the rules. There's really only one major thing you need to remember, and we'll get to that in a minute. So first let's talk about multiplying integers with different signs. When two products of two integers with different signs is negative. The product of two integers with different signs is negative. So a positive multiplied by a negative is a negative. A negative multiplied by a positive is a negative. It does not matter which order it is, but a negative times a positive is a negative. A negative times a positive is a negative, and a positive times a negative is a negative. So 6 times a -4 is a -24. A -4 times a +6 is a -24. A -6 times a +4 is a -24. No matter which order I do it in, if I have one of these being negative and one of them being positive, I'm going to have a negative in my answer. Why is positive times a negative a negative? It's because we're repeating negatives multiple times. So if I have 4, if I gave you 4 times 3, 4 times the -3, just like our example problem, I'm saying I have 4 -3s. So I'm saying -3 plus -3 plus -3 plus -3. So of course my answer is going to be negative. It's going to be a -12 because I'm getting farther and farther to the left in my number line. So let's look at a couple examples. Find 3 times a -5 and find a -6 times a +8. So what's a 3 times a -5? Well, it's just a -15, just like a 3 times 5 is regular 15. And a -6 times a +8, well, that's a -48. Because a negative times a positive is a negative. And a positive times a negative is also a negative. Go ahead and try those two. Make sure you understand it. We have 9 times a -2 and a -7 times a +4. Alright, so a 9 times a -2 is a -18. And a -7 times a +4 would give us a -28. Just make sure you know when two things have different signs and you're multiplying them, you're going to get a negative. Let's go ahead and look at what happens if we have two things of the same sign. The product of two integers with the same sign is always going to be positive. So just like a positive times a positive is a positive, a negative times a negative is a positive. And a good way we can remember this, all these rules, is this little tic-tac-toe board. You put positives diagonally, and then you fill in everything else with negatives. So a positive times a negative is a negative. A negative times a positive is a negative. But a negative times a negative is a positive. And the cool thing about this little tic-tac-toe board is it works any way you go about it. Negative times negative is positive. Negative times negative is positive. Positive times positive is a positive. Negative times positive is negative. So no matter which way you get, quote-unquote, tic-tac-toe, it always works. So just like a positive 2 times a positive 6 is a 12, is a positive 12. If I get a negative 2 times a negative 6, I get a positive 12 as well. Why a negative times a negative is a positive? Well, if I have 2 times 1, if I have 2 times a negative 3, I get a negative 6. 2 times a negative 1, negative 3 times a 1 is a negative 3. 0 times a negative 3 is a 0. Notice this pattern. We're adding 3 each time. So it makes sense if I do a negative 1, that pattern's still going to continue and I'll get a positive 3. So on and so forth. But you don't really need to know the why, you just need to know the results. So the results are anything negative times negative is positive. So a negative 11 times a negative 9 will give you a positive 99. Negative 4 squared, well, negative 4 squared, all that's saying is negative 4 times negative 4. Negative 4 times negative 4 is a positive 16. And a negative 3 times a negative 4 times a negative 2. Negative 3 times negative 4 is positive 12. So now I have positive 12 times a negative 2, which gives me a negative 24, because a positive times a negative is a negative. Just like this positive times positive was a positive, this positive times a negative is a negative. So make sure you remember this little tic-tac-toe board to help you if you ever need it. Again, you just make that with doing 3 positives diagonally and filling everything else in negative. And then you can easily see that a negative times a negative is a positive. Go ahead and try those 3 examples, and we'll go ahead and go over them in a quick second. Oops. All right, let's go ahead and go over these. A negative 12 times a negative 4 is going to give me a positive 48. A negative 5 squared is just negative 5 times negative 5, which gives me a positive 25. And a negative 7 times a negative 5 times a negative 3. Well, negative 7 times negative 5 is a positive 35. And a positive 35 times a negative 3, well, 35 times 3 is 105, which means times a negative 3, it's a negative 105. So those are your 3 answers. Let's take a look at some word problems with this. A submersible is diving from the surface of the water at the rate of 90 feet per minute. So I know it's diving, so that's a negative 90 feet, because I don't think a submarine is going above the water. It's going below. What is the depth of the submersible after 7 minutes? I guess it's a submersible, so it doesn't necessarily need to be a submarine. It could just be like a pebble that we dropped into the ocean. Is falling at 90 feet per minute. So, little bubbles here. Where will it be at 7 minutes? Well, let's multiply this negative 90 by 7. So 7 times 0 is 0. 7 times 9 is 63. So 3, 6, 630. So is it 630 feet above the water? No, it's below the water. So it's negative 630 feet. Let's double check our answer. By doing 90 times 7, we get 630. Absolutely. So negative 630 feet below the surface. So 630 feet below the surface, or negative 630 feet. Mr. Simon's bank account automatically deducts a $4 monthly maintenance fee from his savings account. Write a multiplication expression to represent the maintenance fees for 1 year. Well, I know that there's 12 months in 1 year. Find the product and explain its meaning. So I know it's how much is it taking out of his account every month? Well, it's taking out $4. So he's not gaining $4, he's losing $4. So that's minus 4. So I need to multiply minus 4 times 12, which is a negative 48. What does this negative 48 stand for? What's this explain its meaning? Well, this negative 48 is how much is taken out of his account. in a year of his account each year, basically for maintenance per year. So again, guys, don't forget this tic-tac-toe board. We have positive times a negative. So you just do the 3 pluses, make everything else negative. So a positive times a negative is a negative. A negative times a positive is a negative, and a negative times a negative is a positive. This is very important. It's a nice little tool that you guys can use to help you. If you have any questions on this, please feel free to send me an email. Go ahead and watch it over again. But basically, the most important things to remember are if you have different signs, your answer is going to be negative. If you have the same sign and you're multiplying, your answers will be positive. All right, guys, go ahead and work on that worksheet that she should have for you, and it should be on Schoology as well. If you need to view that, I think your assignment is on Schoology. So go ahead and complete your assignment. That is on Schoology. Hope you have a wonderful day. I'll see you all later.